Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Saturday, June 1st, 2025, and Mark Carney's lack of budget is a problem, but not for the pundits, really. The problem for the pundits is that Mark Carney is walking away from his promise to remove the interprovincial trade barriers, and they're having conversations about that, and they're saying, hey, that was just the promise he made to get a majority government. Because he doesn't have a majority, it's your fault that things aren't happening. And they make the case that this is a very ambitious thing to try and get done, and all of the stuff Mark Carney is going to do, which is definitely going to be great, they say, is going to be difficult because he's in a minority position and blah, 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 blah. So it's a whole bunch of bullshit, and it's incredible how wasteful the news is. They talk and they talk and they talk and they waste time about nothing. It's crazy. The 2030 agenda is targeting meat, and you can see it in the size of the herd. It's the lowest it's been since mid-1950s, and the population is much higher. People are eating less meat because it's more expensive. They've effectively phased out red meat and phased out farming beef and cattle, and are in the process of phasing it out. And a few more years of this, it'll be zero, right? And then they'll start working on the next thing. They're stopping smoking in Paris. It's unbelievable what's going on. Speaking of Paris, there are riots in Paris, and the riots in Paris are not Parisians. They're Africans and Arabs and a whole bunch of other people who seemingly just got to Paris. So it is one of those things, shadows of what's to come in Canada. I don't know. And one of the other questions that I can't help but thinking about when I look at the news during the day and during, the morning when I'm checking things is invading another country an act of war? Can you just decide to invade another country and that's fine? You're allowed to do that, no problem. In fact, you have a right to be there and they have a responsibility to put you up in a hotel or something like that. Is that how things work now? Can I just walk into another country and be like, where's my hotel room? And then also, where's the Christmas trees? Why aren't we doing respecting my religious practices? What the heck is going on here, right? Is that acceptable or not? Why are we ignoring the full-blown invasion of our country? Why is that happening? Why are we just closing our eyes and in fact accepting it when middle manager Karens tell us that we're racist? Why are we accepting that? Why don't we turn that around and say, actually, you're stealing our dollars, you're stealing our money and handing it over to these invaders by putting them up in hotel rooms, and that's a big problem for me too, Karen. So I don't understand it. Is that not something that we're supposed to have representatives in government protect us against as citizens in this country? No? Weird. What's the government for then? Maybe I'm confused. Maybe I'm the only one who's confused. I don't know. But there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. Dave, we're going to start with mass immigration because it's an act of war. It really is. And just because some Karen middle manager tells you that it's racist to notice it, we should be demanding that our government stop this nonsense. And if they don't, we should throw them in jail and then replace them with people who will listen to us. I digress. David says mass immigration is a form of warfare. Your government is at war with you. I can't come to another conclusion. Other conclusions don't make sense. It's not our responsibility to import a bunch of people and pay for their accommodations. And it's even less our responsibility to import a bunch of specifically and only exclusively males and put them up in hotels. It's not our responsibility. We shouldn't be doing it. And again, the middle manager Karens who tell us that we're racist for saying we don't want to do this, they have no power here. Why are we listening to them? What in the world has happened? This guy says, agorist, says, they're flooding the country with illegals so that you'll allow them to mandate digital ID. Yeah, problem, reaction, solution. That's what's going on right there. They introduce a problem that they know the solution to, and they just want our consent. And we'd never consent in the current configuration. So what do? They make our cities unsafe and say the way to bring back safety is a digital ID. You're welcome, citizen. No, thank you. Here's what's going on in England. David says it's an invasion that's being facilitated by the authorities. We pay for this. We pay for this invasion, and it's happening in England too, happening in the United Kingdom, happening in Australia, happening in the United States in a different mechanism, but it's still the same result. And it's funded through tax dollars that are laundered to NGOs. And we're not supposed to notice, and we're not supposed to question it. And if U.S. aid gets cut off, Bono goes on Joe Rogan to say, aren't you worried about the Trump administration cutting off this aid? That aid is used to import migrants to the West in order to destabilize our country, in order to problem reaction solution us into digital IDs and central bank digital currencies. More control, less freedom for your safety, comrade. Really, that's what's going on. I wish it weren't so, but here it is happening in real time for us to notice and get canceled when we notice. Here's Mark, and he says, French and UK border patrols overwhelmed as more than 1,000 channel migrants arrive in UK waters on Saturday. It smashes the previous daily total for the year when 825 migrants made the illegal crossing this year. Earlier this month, more than 14,000 have crossed so far in 2025. That's England, right? In small boats over the channel. And why are they putting them up in hotels? Why are the British on the hook for this? Why can't they get rid of these people? There's no realistic reason. Why is Ireland creating towns for migrants? Michael O'Keefe says, shocking new footage of Conmel, migrant refugee plantation in County Tipperary, a purpose-built village for foreigners. When Irish people struggle with high rent and mortgages, the government builds villages for non-Irish people. Isn't that weird? All of this is just like COVID. They do different things, different push and pull, different incentives, different carrots and sticks, and different government spending for different systems to see what they can get away with, what they can do. In Canada, we did the tiny homeless shelter things, right? And so we're building migrant parks for homeless people, quote unquote, but it's really the same thing that's happening here, right? And so we're getting our tax dollars stolen from us and spent on migrants. Why? Why do we tolerate that? Why do we let middle managers tell us that we have to? This is insanity. Why do we even let prime ministers tell us that we have to? That's treason. It's not working for us. It's working for the foreigners. That's not what the government's supposed to do. Ron says none of this adds up anymore. If we keep pretending it does add up, we're going to watch our country continue to fall apart piece by piece. Since the start of 2025, Canada has brought in over 817,000 newcomers. Okay, let's be skeptical about that. In the Canada Poly chat, Mike was talking about, hey, have you guys verified this number? And I was like, weird. He said Rebel News uses Juno News as their source. Juno News cites a report, but he put the report into ChatGPT and no numbers came up. He couldn't find the reference to 817,000 people coming in. And then Tanglefoot says, respectfully, are you going by that chart that's circulating? Did you verify its authenticity? Because frankly, I can't find any evidence the 800,000 number is accurate. And TGM says, what if it's accurate? And Tanglefoot continues, these numbers include extension of permits to people who are already here. I believe 85% of Canada's issues are due to immigration overwhelming our institutions. These numbers, the 800,000 since the beginning of 2025, are actually... these numbers actually show restraint from prior years. Further reductions and better enforcement is needed. So I don't know why she thinks these numbers show restraint from prior years. Prior years, maybe they were close to 2 million, but I was under the impression it was just over 1 million. But this number, this 800,000 number is close to what Mark Carney's proposed number would be if we get 5% of the population as new Canadians every year, permanent residents, temporary foreign workers, and student stream all combined. Apparently, that's going to be 5%. Right now, it's less than 2%, I think. Right now, it's in the hundreds of thousands. 5% is 2.1 million. So I took 2.1 million and I asked it, or I just did I didn't ask ChatGPT. I did the math myself. And I said to the calculator, what is 2.1 million divided by 12 to get the monthly number? 175,000. 175,000 times 4 to get the up to April number, which I now realize I should have done 6 because today's June 1st. But this is the up to April number. So the first 4 months of 2025, which I think is what the numbers are talking about here, the first 4 months, is 700,000. So under Mark Carney's plan, we would be getting 700,000 people anyway. So the people talking about the authenticity of this number, I think is accurate. Like, we should question where these numbers come from for sure. But that number is going to be what we're doing as a matter of, this is the plan, very soon, as soon as Mark Carney gets his hands on the immigration system and the Parliament's back to push it through. So it's, yes, I couldn't find the verification of this number either. So it's something to question for sure. But I think that this is happening and it's going to continue to happen. And so I'm going to continue to read Ron's Ron's thing here, but have a caveat of, I'm not sure where that number comes from. So immigration now makes up nearly all of our population growth. I think that's true, 97.6%. And the Century Initiative, run by former Governor General, and I can't remember the Governor General's name who runs it, but she runs the office. And their stated goal, and I've gone over this a bunch of times in the show years ago now, I guess, but their stated goal is to have 100% of the growth in Canada fully from immigration. That's the stated goal. They want to steal our country, and they don't care that you know it. Weird, right? Isn't that weird? But here's the problem. We don't have enough jobs, housing, or services to support this kind of growth. Right now, over 1.6 million people in Canada are unemployed. Youth unemployment is around 14%. Entire industries are being hit hard, especially with U.S. tariffs hammering manufacturing. Businesses are starting to lay hundreds of thousands of people off, and multiple economists are warning we're on the edge of a recession. At the same time, over 1 million temporary residents are supposed to have their visas expire this year, and we don't even know how many are actually leaving. Housing, forget it. Canada is short over 3.5 million homes by 2030. Young people can't move out. Couples can't start families, and rent is becoming just as unaffordable as buying. Families are being crushed under the cost of food, gas, and utilities, you name it. Seniors, especially women and immigrants, are falling into poverty. Many are living alone on fixed incomes while everything around them gets more expensive. And the middle class, the actual backbone of this country, is shrinking fast. Incomes aren't keeping up, savings are being drained, and financial security is becoming a thing of the past. When people can't work, can't afford to live, and feel like the system has given up on them, things start to break. Serious violent crime, sexual assaults and rape, addiction, alcoholism, suicide, and hopelessness. We're not setting anyone up for a better life, not Canadians, not newcomers. We're stacking more weight on a system that's already cracking. And for what? So here's the question. Where's the roadmap? What's the plan that brings us back to stability, security, and sanity? Because right now, we're not building towards a stronger future. We're sprinting straight into a brick wall, and behind that is a cliff. The plan, I'll let you know, just in case you're not unaware, the plan is to let it break, blame Canadians and or some subset of the population, probably the alt-right or right-wing Canadians or white Canadians if they can get away with it. And then they'll say, in order to protect you from these evil people, we'll give you central bank digital currencies and digital IDs so we can identify the bad people and keep them out of the stores that you want to go in and keep them off transit and make sure they can't buy plane tickets and things like that. And so then they'll use AI, central bank digital currency, and digital ID to police everything about everything in Canada. And if you are a dissident, they will crush you by unpersoning you. And you can look and see what the social credit has done in China. There are people who are homeless because their social credit score is so low that nobody wants to associate with them, because if you associate with somebody who's got a low social credit score, that brings your score down. So they get kicked out of houses. They're not allowed to live with people, so on and so forth. And they just live on the streets. And so they'll starve and kill you through excluding you from society because that's humane or something like that. And that encourages you to, pick up your social credit score and do nice things and fall in line. But it can also police your speech. It can police your thoughts. It can police all sorts of different things. That's the goal. They want us to collapse, and anything they can do to hasten that on, they're going to do. And when that happens, they're going to say, Canada's bankrupt. We need to get a loan from the International Monetary Fund, but the loan comes with caveats. The loan says it'll only come in digital form. And we can only distribute the money in digital form. Darn, right? Sorry, Canada. And so we've got a digital currency, and in order to get the digital currency, obviously you have to have the digital ID. So it's not us, it's the IMF. I'm sorry, it's the International Monetary Fund, so we can't do anything about it. Sorry. And then Canadians will fall in line because they'll say, well, at least we can buy bread with this money, right? At least we're not going to starve. And that'll be the rhetoric. And I hope I'm wrong. I really, really hope I'm wrong. David says, Dear Canadians, your home is being destroyed by mass immigration. Your healthcare system is in ruins. Your children are taught to hate while they're in school. Crime rates are skyrocketing. Your grandchildren will never own a house. Please wake up. It's almost too late. Oh, it's too late. It's too late for it's too late to vote our way out of this. So we should probably realize the game we're in. Julia says the only way to fix Canada is to dissolve Confederation. I think taking over the provinces is a possibility. Over the past 158 years, he says, Confederation has consistently proven to be completely unreformable by working within the existing system. Yes, you cannot come into this system because it has too many stakeholders who like it the way it is, and they have a lot of money. The only way to deal with it is, hi, Danielle Smith, here's all the paperwork, you're done, get out. See ya. And that's it. But other than that, and that's a coup. Like, make no mistake, I'm talking about a bloodless coup. And it usually, well, we're watching a coup right now. We're watching Canada be taken over by globalists, and we're in the midst of a coup. I think that's what's going on. But in order to fix it, we would have to take over the government at a different level than the current coup going on. And then, make no mistake, all assets would attack you. You would now be the target of everybody, and you would be enemy number one. Trump would pale in comparison to this new danger for Canada, right? I promise you. They're terrified that we will stand up and tell them no. Chris says, do you believe that Canada is in the midst of a coup? He says, in my opinion, it's been a slow burn over decades, but we're still in the midst. Yeah, it's a socialist coup, and we are being robbed from, taken for a ride. Here's one example. Juno News says a Catholic district school board trustee is stuck with a $200,000 legal bill after the Supreme Court of Canada denied his appeal to overturn a misconduct charge for defending the Catholic faith. And so the Supreme Court of Canada has refused Mike Del Grande's appeal of a Superior Court decision, which found the Toronto Catholic District School Board had legally reprimanded Del Grande for a motion he put forward in November 2019 in defense of Catholic teaching within the Catholic School Board. How dare you, sir? This is a Catholic school board. So here's a $200,000 fine, right? It's a weaponization of our institutions against the people who would defend it. If you stand up for Catholic teaching in the Catholic school board, you get a $200,000 fine. Okay? You understand how this works? You stand up, you'll get crushed. That's what they want. So the only way you can stand up is with a whole bunch of people behind you and somebody saying, we don't trust you, government, to do this anymore. We're going to do it ourselves. Get out. That's it. That's where we're at. This is 7 minutes, and the Crown versus Remlewski trial. And my gosh, like, we're losing our rights one step at a time. And I think people don't realize it. And if they do realize it, they'll be crushed if they mention it, right? Like my YouTube channel's doing real well. Anyway, here's this.
David Remlewski was arrested and criminally charged with mischief for his peaceful participation in what became the largest demonstration in Canadian history, Freedom Convoy 2022. He was the first to be acquitted in the Ontario Court of Justice, a ruling that directly challenged the government's narrative. But instead of accepting that decision, the Crown pursued appeal until they secured a conviction before a different judge. Left with no choice, David then sought leave to appeal to the Court of Appeal for Ontario, but his request was denied without explanation. From the onset, David's case was used as a legal test to establish the idea that merely being present at the Freedom Convoy was enough to warrant a mischief charge. The courts introduced and applied legal misinterpretations that effectively criminalized peaceful presence, relying on Section 21 of the Criminal Code, party to an offense, without clearly identifying any principal offender. In other words, people were being found guilty of being a party to an alleged crime that had no main perpetrator. After his request for leave was denied provincially, David took the final step in our justice system and filed for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. Tragically, just 7 days later, he passed away. To this day, the cause of his death remains unknown. David's widow, Lisa Remlewski, has courageously continued the fight, submitting an affidavit to the Supreme Court affirming her wish to proceed with the appeal, exactly as David would have wanted. This case is of national importance. David Remlewski is the first Freedom Convoy participant to apply for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. The outcome will directly impact hundreds of peaceful demonstrators, many still facing charges, appeals, or seeking restitution.
The story seems suspect. Weird, strange deaths, etc., and that's not great. So again, another example, like the apparatus of the school system being turned against Catholic teachers who dare to stand up for teaching Catholic beliefs in a Catholic school. Here's a $200,000 fine. People who stand up to the government get charged and people who successfully appeal that charge die under mysterious circumstances after filing the final appeal to the Supreme Court. Isn't that crazy? What else could happen with unchecked mass migration into a country? France? Jim says, Paris under siege, city devastated by mob violence. North African and Arab rioters have turned Paris into a war zone. Here is an African rioter breaking a bus shelter, right, with a crowbar. These people are here for war. These men are here for war. They're not here with their women and children. These men are here for war. And that's what they're doing. They're bringing war to the streets of Paris. What do you think is going to happen in Canada? What do you think? Because I think this is going to happen in Canada, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think it's going to happen in Canada. And I think that our government is selling us out and turning a blind eye to it. Disclosed TV says at least 2 dead, 1 police officer in a coma, hundreds injured after violent riots by barbarians yesterday in Paris, France. Well, you let the barbarians in, guys. Here's Europe again. Europe says, send these savages back to the desert from which they came. Radio Genoa says, North Africans and Arabs devastate Paris. Parisians riot after PSG win. Paris Saint-Germain, the football club there. Mbappe was on that for a while, but he's not anymore. Now he's playing in the Middle East. Anyways, I digress. It's not Parisians rioting. It's an excuse, and somebody's given an order, maybe Order 66, who knows? Maybe not. Seems like the riot's under control now, but these things are not what they appear and not what they're reported to be either, right? Do more research, because I feel like there's more to this than meets the eye. Let's talk about Canada. I know it's a little bit of time to get there today, but I feel like all of this is pertinent and what's going on in Canada, because all of us, the West entirely, is being targeted by whatever's going on right now, and our refusal to see it and our refusal to react is hampering our ability to stop it. And so, I mean, all I can do is talk about it, I guess, aside from standing in front of that train and getting run over, right? Like, here's Laurie, and he's talking about our fiscal situation with Mark Carney. And he says, Mark Carney's hocus pocus plan to increase debt and balance the budget. Carney's promised his government will spend less and invest more is the same sort of fiscal flimflammery as Justin Trudeau's claim that the budget will balance itself. Yeah, so we're being sold a bunch of lies from Mark Carney, and that's being used to buy time, I think, mostly. And in that time, he's going to steal more and ensure. I think that the coup is happening and they're consolidating power. So they've got their people in place now and they're consolidating power. And previously they had Justin Trudeau, and that was all consolidated, nice and strong. And then it started to fail. January it collapsed, and they were like, what can we do? And then this is what they've done. And now they're reconsolidating their power. And we would be foolish to allow them to. And nobody's talking, like, none of the MPs that have been elected, Liberals or Conservative or anybody else, nobody's talking about this. Nobody's saying the election was rigged. Things seem really hinky. Everything seems strange. Pierre Poilievre's talking about how Mark Carney's fiscal plan was a lie. He didn't have a fiscal plan. He doesn't have one now. I don't know how he can put together a budget snapshot, or not even a budget snapshot, a spending plan. We'd like to spend this money and not have a budget and have any hope in hell of passing the spending? I don't get it, but okay. Here's the leader of the opposition, who's going to be running in a by-election soon to get back into the House of Commons, talking about Mark Carney's first little while in office. And, well, I think it's weak, because we're not going to address any of the problems. We're going to pretend like this is business as usual. Here we go.
Hand it to them. Liberals are masters of symbolism. See, in the recent election, to convince people that they were no longer the party of reckless spenders, they abruptly replaced a leader who looked like a reckless teenage trust fund baby with a stern-looking banker. The jet black, carefully groomed hair replaced the uncombed surfer dude hairstyle. The corporate dress shoes replaced the childish running shoes. The MBA lingo replaced the dreamy rhetoric. The spend less, invest more slogan replaced the budgets will balance themselves rhetoric of Justin Trudeau. Wow, what a change. But do the numbers back up the symbolism? Well, we found out this week. Prime Minister Carney tabled his first spending package before the House of Commons, called the main estimate. See, government has to get the approval of the House of Commons to do any spending. So they put forward this package, and it will stack up against the previous Trudeau spending. And to be fair, Mr. Carney's spending is not as bad as Trudeau's. It's worse to start with. We know that he inherited a morbidly obese Liberal government, and he...
Okay, all of this. So in my mind, there are two branches of which to pursue this. The budgetary spending branch, right? This is a proposal to spend 900 trillion kajillion dollars, and we think that this spending is too much. Or that they submitted a spending package without a budget. And that invalidates the spending package because we're not going to pass a spending package without a budget. You have to give us a budget if you want to spend anything, would be my response. And then I would have the other opposition parties, if they're rational, say, yeah, we're not going to authorize any spending without a budget, you effing idiots. And that would be the end of the conversation because they can't pass any spending without approval of the Parliament, without the approval of the House. So we wouldn't need to say it's going to be 8% more to convince me how bad that is. I know how bad it is to say we're just going to spend a kajillion dollars here. Don't worry about the budget. We'll give you a budget in, December. No. How about no? I'm not going to give you any money to spend because you seem irresponsible and like you work for somebody else. So it doesn't make any sense to me to go in this direction of the spending's too high when they shouldn't have access to spending at all anyway because they haven't given us a budget. So fail, right? Like Pierre Poilievre is failing big time. And you can see that. You don't need me to tell you that. You can see that. You can sit there and say, this is the wrong pathway to follow this situation down. Why aren't you stopping him from moving forward with this spending package with no budget? You idiot. And that's my question. Pierre, what are you doing, man? Doesn't make any sense. So my only conclusion can be that, or it is that he works with Carney in order to get this through because they don't work for us. That's my only conclusion. That's the only thing that can be true. There you go. And he doesn't even have a majority government. If he had a majority government, they still shouldn't be able to pass a budget without the approval of the House, everybody, et cetera, but still, I digress. Here's Melanie in Saskatchewan. She says, an open letter to Prime Minister Carney. Your budgetless farce mocks every Canadian. Dear Prime Minister Carney, while Canadians choke on runaway prices, stagnant wages, and an economic future bleaker than a prairie winter's squall, your decision to slap a $486.9 billion spending plan on the table without a federal budget is a smirking slap to every taxpayer from Victoria to St. John's. This isn't governance, it's a fiscal circus, with you as ringmaster tossing out our tax dollars like confetti at a Bay Street bash. Canadians are not impressed with your budgetless sham. Your main estimates, a bloated $486.9 billion fever dream, dangling shiny baubles, $31 billion for defense by 2029, $5 billion yearly for middle-class tax cuts, and wispy promises of housing relief, plus a stingy $42 million for CBC, despite your campaign's lofty $150 million pledge. How pissed will Barton and Cochrane be? But without a budget, you've left us squinting into the void. Will you pile more debt onto our $1.2 trillion burden? Gut services families rely on? Or just pray the fiscal fairies will wave their magic wands? This isn't transparency. It's budgetary shell game, and we're not your gullible marks. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And we don't even have a say. They're not worried about impressing us because they don't work for us, and the people they work for have the elections rigged. Back to this. Mark Carney, you waltzed into the PMO waving your financier's halo and swearing prudence with a banker's polish. The bad guys in the 1930s were called robber barons, and I think that term evolved from robber bankers or something like that, and the bankers didn't like being so on the nose, so they kind of changed it to barons, I think. There was some game there. There was something that happened between the language in the early period when they were identified as the problem, and then robber barons took over, I think. But people aren't like, oh, good, come and save me, banker. That's not like, the banker is often, and especially now, seen as the bad guy. He's not the good guy. So I'm surprised everybody's saying, and a lot of people are saying, oh, he's so polished, he looks so good, blah, blah, blah. Look at his teeth, for crying out loud. He doesn't look, he looks the opposite of good. He looks terrifying. He looks like a vampire, for crying out loud. And so like all of the banker's halo, financier's halo, give me a break, right? Like, I don't think so. I have a huge disagreement with how they're framing him, because they're doing it to rescue his image. Anyway, back to this. Pray tell, did you swipe Justin Trudeau's dog-eared scripture from the Church of Budget Mismanagement, or is your $486 billion budgetless bender a fresh gospel of fiscal lunacy? And she continues on, and she's got quite flourishing rhetoric. It's quite good. And she finishes with this, which is where the title of today's show comes from. But she says, table a budget or face the fury of a nation sick of your fiscal smoke and mirrors. Now, how do we manifest that fury? Because they're not worried about us reelecting them. They can get reelected any which way. They've got the elections rigged. They just went through an election and they won almost a majority, right? Like, they're not worried about us. So how can we manifest that fury? What does that mean really, right? And so I don't know. And it's interesting because I think people aren't going to tolerate this, but also people are unable to bring anything to bear because your local MP doesn't give a shit. Your local MPP, your provincial or MLA doesn't care. Your mayor works for the globalists. All the councillors are woke. Everybody in the school board is woke. Nobody cares. Nobody's going to say, yeah, this is wrong. So how do we reasonably communicate this? Because there are a lot of people and there's a lot of money that support those people who want to look the other way. So, man, I don't know. We seem to be in a bad way. Really, really. Dimitri says, why is a reporter now spinning to justify Mark Carney's backing away from his clear campaign promise? This is 2.5 minutes. The first minute and a half are these guys talking about Mark Carney and the difficulty of delivering on his promises, because the promises he made were to get a majority government and he didn't get a majority government. And, you know, that's kind of your fault. And I almost want to play it because it's so ridiculous. Like, everything they say is spun. Everything they're saying is spun. And I disagree with all of it, but I think I'm going to play it. We're going to back it up to here. No, we have to back it up all the way. The important part is really like down here where he's talking about how Mark Carney backs away from the interprovincial trade and the problems with all of that. But it's jaw-dropping how they're trying to sanitize Mark Carney and say, oh, you know, what's really happened is your fault, Canada, and the electorate, right, the voters. I disagree with everything, but I can't believe that they're even trying to float this argument. Here it is. Like, these people do not work for us. They do not. They are propagandists to the highest order. And they talk about Mark Carney like he's well-loved, or, you know, like people really want to like him, and the idea of Mark Carney is super great. The idea of Mark Carney, the robber baron banker? Yeah, I don't think so. The terrifying vampire-looking guy with crazy bad teeth, that guy, the idea of that guy? No, I don't think so. Anyway, you have to listen to this. It's insane.
Expectations management. Mm-hmm. Mark Carney is managing expectations sky high.
Yeah.
He is, you know, they're above the Golden Dome,
yeah.
You know, in terms of pace and scale and promise. And, you know, I think the premiers are expecting a whole lot of stuff on Monday, and industry is expecting it too. What do you make of just the runway that he's laid out for all the people he needs to work with?
It's incredibly ambitious and aggressive. Expectations are incredibly high, and it's why he's prime minister, though, at the same time. People were expecting a lot from him. People didn't know who Mark Carney was a number of months ago. They had an idea of who he was, and there was this resume, this great resume he had as a central banker in both Canada and England and chair of...
Nobody knew who he was. He had this great resume. Central banker of Canada and England. This is a great resume? I don't think so. England hated him. I think Canada was kind of okay with him. Stephen Harper seemed to like him. But I don't agree with this idea that he was a complete unknown with a stellar resume. Maybe, but the actual practical, what happened in England during Mark Carney's tenure and after, he's been widely panned for it. And like, publicly panned for it. Liz Truss has warned Canadians publicly multiple times, and the CBC takes that and says, oh yeah, great resume, you know, super, super good. Nobody knows who he is. I knew who he was. I knew he was terrifying and that we didn't want him. So these guys are trying to sanitize Mark Carney's image.
Of a major asset firm. It was about, you know, the thought and the idea of Mark Carney, and I think that was the narrative, and who the Liberals really ran was the idea of Mark Carney. So he had to set expectations high to be able...
They ran the real Mark Carney.
To win that election. But now they are sky high, and they're going to be incredibly difficult to achieve. There's a number of big issues. The two biggest issues, he's promised to get rid of interprovincial trade barriers by July 1st. That was the initial promise. Now, I understand he meant federal barriers, not the actual provinces, but so it's a smaller scale. But expectations were that they were going to be gone, and they're not at that provincial level. It'll be at the federal part of it that'll be gone, or supposed to be gone. But now we're hearing that no, now they're saying they'll just introduce legislation before July 1st. That is a huge step back, and I think people are going to be wondering, is he going to be able to meet these expectations?
Fred, just on that though, isn't that a function of being a minority prime minister as opposed to a majority prime minister? Like you can't promise that Parliament will pass something by a certain date.
But he did promise it. He said he would do this.
Right, during the election when he was campaigning for a majority, but the reality is now that he's 3 seats short, right? You know what I mean? Like,
sure, but the Bloc have said they'll give them a year to and support them in legislation to so it sounds to me like it's a working majority. The details on that promise, though, when you're getting rid of internal trade barriers and how it might affect Quebec. But yeah, I take your point.
I haven't heard that the Bloc will give them a year, but we'll see. And if that's true, well, there you go. I mean, coup completed, right? Jeepers creepers. Concerned Canadian says, we demand disclosure of Mark Carney's investments and continuing the relationship with Brookfield. Here's Michael Cooper talking about this.
Member for St. Albert, Sturgeon River. Mr. Speaker, when the Prime Minister was chair of Brookfield, Brookfield registered $30 billion of investment funds in offshore tax havens in Bermuda and the Cayman Islands, all to avoid paying taxes in Canada. And now the Prime Minister refuses to come clean and disclose his assets to Canadians. Canadians deserve to know, does the Prime Minister have any financial holdings hidden away in offshore tax havens, yes or no?
And that was the other thing. Canadians knew about Mark Carney through Brookfield and through things in the news that were prominent. Mark Carney has been an advisor to Justin Trudeau for years. The whole thing is ridiculous. And now he's not disclosing his financial conflicts. I mean, I'm shocked, but I'm not, right? So the answer is a nothing burger answer like usual. So it's one of those things. Danielle Smith says, Alberta has a proposal for Prime Minister Carney. The upside for Canada is Alberta is unlocking $14 trillion in oil wealth that will benefit the millions of Canadians for generations. All Alberta needs is this list. I think I give this list well, it's not going to get done. I don't think even one thing on this list is going to get done. And so I'll be interested to see Danielle Smith's so what. Is the so what? We'll call Donald Trump and ask him to get this done because I think he'll get it done this weekend. Because if that's the so what, then maybe we'll get some movement. But if it's not, and I don't think it is because Danielle Smith has said that she doesn't want to pursue Alberta independence, then nothing's going to happen, unfortunately. She's going to say, Mark Carney doesn't represent us properly, just like Justin Trudeau didn't. And then nothing, court battles and things like that. But the courts are corrupt. So all Alberta needs, she says, is guaranteed corridor and port access to tidewater off the Pacific, Arctic, and Atlantic coast for the international export of Alberta resources, approval of an oil pipeline to the BC Northwest coast, overhauling the No More Pipelines Law, Bill C-69, to respect provincial jurisdiction and reduce the red tape for pipeline and other resource infrastructure, scrapping unconstitutional industry-killing regulations like the oil and gas emissions cap and net zero power regulations, repealing the tanker ban to enable exports from the Port of Prince Rupert, returning the regulation of industrial emissions to the provinces, and working with Pathways and Alberta to reach a final investment decision on the project so Canadian oil can be marketed as the cleanest on the planet for decades. So I say again, she's not going to get any of that. And so we'll see how that all works out because it's not so good. It's not so good that it would be pretty simple to really unleash Alberta and get things going. And Mark Carney's not going to do any of that. So that's my prediction. We'll see how it all plays out. I've got to say goodbye to the stream. Should we finish this? We'll finish this, and then we'll say goodbye to the stream. So we'll finish off our economic grab bag of governance, and then we'll go into our regular grab bag of governance. Dominic LeBlanc is talking about trade with the United States. He says, we've taken note of President Trump's comments regarding the doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum in the face of economic threats posed by the United States. Canada remains resolute in defending our workers and our communities. We can give ourselves far more than the United States can take from us. That's why this Monday, the Prime Minister will meet with premiers in Saskatoon with one goal, build one Canadian economy out of 13 and get a big nation-building projects built faster. As we negotiate a new economic and security relationship with the United States, Canada's new government will stand strong to get the best deal for Canadians. We will take as long as necessary, but no longer to do so. As long as necessary, but no longer, eh? I don't know. I don't want these people negotiating with Donald Trump on our behalf. I think that they are spoils. I think they are people who work for globalist communists, and they're not going to negotiate on our behalf. They're going to negotiate on their behalf. And so I don't want them to negotiate for us. Mel Jolie says, my statement, we are fighting the current U.S. unjustified and unlawful tariffs with our own retaliatory actions, strong domestic support packages, and big moves to diversify our trade. The tariffs and the retaliation was written into the USMCA, and you can read it yourself, Mel Jolie. I think it's weird that she's saying unjustified and unlawful. The justification is the fentanyl and illegals coming into the country. So unjustified and unlawful? Give me a break. Our steel and aluminum, back to this, workers and businesses deserve no less than our full commitment, both for these current tariffs as well for any potential future tariffs. Canola people, I'm not ready to talk to you yet, says Mel Jolie. I've been in constant contact with steel and aluminum producers and workers and look forward to a formal set of meetings in the coming days to advance our plan. Nothing about canola and China tariffs, only Donald Trump tariffs, right? And the China tariffs are justified and lawful, I guess, right? Because Trump's tariffs are unjustified and unlawful. So China's tariffs, which they're remaining silent on, must be fine. Mark Nixon says, we haven't seen this type of housing market collapse in Toronto since the 1990s. The trend started in 24, well before Donald Trump's tariffs. The tariffs are just accelerating the trend. So Toronto new home sales crashed 72% to a record low, and Greater Toronto real estate prices are lower but not cheap. The price of a benchmark typical new home across the GTA, $1.5 million for a single family and $1 million for a condo. So that's a crazy, crazy number. But people are struggling, and even with the collapse, like the numbers previously were much higher, right? Like 1.9 down to 1.5 and 1.3 or 4, 1.2, 1.3, 1.2, 1.3 down to 1. So yeah, it's a big collapse, but we have another there's a lot of money locked up in Canadian real estate that doesn't need to be there, and in order to restore affordability, we need to have housing drop a lot. So down to $100,000, $50,000, and $100,000 instead of $900,000. But the people who own property don't want that to happen because then their asset loses value, right? So, yep. All right, everybody on the stream, thanks for watching, and we will catch you today. We're doing a kitchen table talk, so we'll be around at 1 o'clock. If you're interested to join, you can go to canadapoly.com and join the email I send out, and that's where it's not a Zoom link, it's a Google Meet link. And you can join in if you're interested, but everybody on the panel, looking forward to seeing you all today. It's at 12:30 as well, everyone. So 12:30 to 1:30 today instead of 1. I hope that's okay, but that's all I could do. And so we'll catch you guys tomorrow or later today. And for everybody else, hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to canadapoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful